The first thing Petra Winston noticed was the chair biting into the backs of her thighs. Hard plastic. Cheap. The kind that flexed when you shifted your weight but never broke. Her wrists were tied behind it with something rough nylon cord, maybe. Every time she moved, the rope burned her skin, heat blooming under the surface, sharp and angry. Her ankles were bound too tight. Whoever tied them knew what they were doing. The second thing she noticed was the light. Not darkness light. An emergency bulb mounted high on the wall pulsed red, slow and mechanical, washing the room in a warning glow. On, off, on, off. Each flash carved the warehouse into pieces. Corrugated metal walls, stacks of wooden pallets, oil stains bleeding into concrete like old secrets that never scrubbed out. Her sweat ran cold down her spine. Petra tried to control her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow, quiet. Panic burned oxygen too fast. She'd learned that years ago, long before tonight. Fear made you sloppy. Sloppy got you hurt. Her head throbbed where something chemical still lingered, sweet and sharp at the back of her throat. Whatever they'd used on her hadn't fully worn off. The room tilted slightly every time she focused too hard. She blinked, grounding herself, counting the pulses of red light. 1, 2, 3. Boots scraped somewhere beyond the far wall. Not close. Not yet. Voices drifted in low, careless. Men who weren't worried. Men who believed the hard part was already done. Petra swallowed. Her shoulders ached. Her fingers were numb. She flexed them carefully, testing. The rope didn't give. She adjusted her wrists a fraction, seeking friction, leverage, anything. The chair creaked in protest. She froze instantly. Silence followed. Then laughter. Relax, one of the men said. She's not going anywhere. A chair dragged across concrete. Someone sat. Another man lit something she smelled smoke, bitter and heavy. Tobacco. Expensive. Not the kind you bought at a corner store. Petra closed her eyes for half a second. Miho. The name formed before she could stop it. A reflex. A need. She didn't know if he even knew yet. If the club's cameras had already been checked. If the power outage had delayed everything. If the warehouse door exploded inward. Metal screamed. Hinges tore. The impact sent a shockwave through the room so violent the chair legs lifted an inch off the floor before slamming back down. Dust burst into the air. The red light flickered, stuttered, then stabilized. For half a second, nobody moved. Then everything happened at once. Boots thundered across concrete, fast, controlled, purposeful, not running, advancing. Commands cut through the chaos, sharp and precise, spoken in Korean, each syllable clipped like a blade striking stone. Down, hands, move, gunfire cracked. Not wild, not frantic, measured. The sound was deafening inside the metal shell of the warehouse, short bursts that punched the air out of Petra's lungs even from across the room. Muzzle flashes bloomed white-hot against the red emergency light, strobing the space into fragments. A man screamed. Another fell hard, the sound of his body hitting concrete sickeningly solid. Petra flinched despite herself, heart hammering so hard it hurt. And then she saw him. Kong Miho stepped through the ruined doorway like the world had arranged itself to make room. He moved with terrifying calm, gun already raised, both hands steady. Black shirt, dark jacket open, flaring slightly with each step. His face was carved from control, jaw tight, eyes cold, focused, unreadable. There was no hesitation in him, no doubt, just intent. For one suspended moment, Petra's mind betrayed her with a question she didn't want to ask. Is he here to save me, or to end this? Miho fired again. A body dropped between them, collapsing sideways into a stack of pallets. Wood splintered. Someone cursed. Another voice pleaded in Korean, fast and desperate, words tumbling over each other. Miho didn't answer. He advanced, boots crunching over debris, stepping past fallen men without looking down. His attention tracked the room in clean angles, clearing corners, registering threats, dismissing them. Then his eyes found her. Everything else fell away. The gun lowered a fraction. Not much, just enough. Petra saw it, the crack in the armor. The split second where the Ice King became a man staring at the person he loved tied to a chair under a pulsing red light. Petra. He didn't shout. Didn't need to. Her name carried across the room like a hand reaching for her. I'm here, she said, her voice raw, smaller than she wanted it to be. Miho, I'm here. He crossed the distance between them in seconds. Another man lunged from the side, panic written across his face, weapon half raised. Miho pivoted without breaking stride. One shot. The man crumpled, skidding across the floor until he hit the wall with a dull, final thud. Miho dropped to his knees in front of her. Up close, Petra could see the fury burning under his control. His hands shook as he reached behind the chair, fingers working the knot at her wrists. Gunmetal and smoke clung to him, sharp and familiar now, mixed with the scent of his cologne, clean, expensive, grounding. "Are you hurt?" he asked, low and urgent. "Did they touch you?" "I'm okay," she said quickly. "I fought." "I'm okay." The rope snapped loose. Her arms came free in a rush of pain and pins and needles. Miho caught her before she could slump forward, pulling her into his chest with crushing force. For the first time since she'd known him, his breathing was uneven. "I thought I was too late," he said into her hair, voice rough, stripped bare. "I thought, I'm here," she repeated, clutching his shirt. "You're here." Around them, the warehouse fell silent except for distant movement, his men securing the perimeter, radios murmuring, boots repositioning. The red light continued its pulse. Indifferent, Miho pulled back just enough to look at her. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheeks, checking for injuries, memorizing her existence like he needed proof she was real. Someone groaned nearby. Miho's expression shifted instantly. The warmth vanished, replaced by something colder, sharper. He stood, placing his body between Petra and the room, gun rising again. "Stay behind me," he said. Not a suggestion, a law. A man lay propped against a pallet, blood darkening his sleeve, eyes wide with terror. He looked at Miho like he was staring at the end of the world. "Please," the man said. "I was just told to watch her. I didn't." Miho approached slowly. Petra's heart hammered. She knew this side of him existed. She'd seen shadows of it. Never this close. Never unleashed. Miho stopped an arm's length away. "You knew who she was," he said quietly. The man shook his head too fast. "I swear." The gun clicked. Empty. The sound was small, mechanical, final. Someone screamed. "Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos." Koreatown never slept. It only changed tempo. By day, it was steam rising from sidewalk grates, delivery trucks double parked on narrow streets, fluorescent signs still buzzing even under sunlight. By night, it became something else entirely, a bloodstream of neon and bass lines, perfume and exhaust, cash moving hand to hand, with quiet efficiency. The buildings pressed close together here, old stone and newer glass stacked like generations forced to coexist. Restaurants stayed open past midnight. Karaoke rooms swallowed laughter and secrets. Clubs pulsed behind unmarked doors. Power lived here, but it didn't announce itself. You didn't see it on the street level. You felt it in how certain doors opened faster, in which inspectors never showed up, in which complaints vanished before they were ever filed. Koreatown functioned like a living organism. Every business, a cell, every alley, a vein, every favor part of a circulatory system that kept the whole thing alive. And at the center of it all was Kong Miho. People argued about when he truly took over. Some said it was the night his father died. Others said it was months later, when the dust settled and the old men realized the son wasn't waiting for permission. Either way, by the time most people noticed his rise, it was already too late to stop it. They didn't call him boss at first. They called him quiet. That was the thing everyone remembered. Meetings where he said almost nothing. Arguments where he let other men raise their voices until they exhausted themselves. Deals where he listened, nodded once, and walked away without countering, only for the terms to change overnight in his favor. In a city addicted to noise, Miho operated in silence. He wore tailored suits, but never flashy ones. Dark colors, clean lines, no visible excess. His cars were expensive, but never customized. His clubs were immaculate, but not gaudy. Money flowed through his organization, like water through stone, constant, controlled, leaving no trace of panic. Older men underestimated him because of his age. Younger ones mistook his restraint for weakness. Neither mistake lasted long. New York had always been a mosaic of empires stacked on top of each other, Italian crews holding on to old neighborhoods like inheritance, Russian outfits embedded in construction and import routes, Chinese syndicates operating behind family businesses and banquet halls. Koreatown was newer ground, smaller, dense, perfect for someone who understood modern America better than tradition-bound rivals ever could. Miho understood it intimately. Legitimate fronts mattered now. Paper trails mattered. Social optics mattered. He didn't rely on backroom handshakes alone. He owned real estate through shell companies that passed every audit. He invested in nightlife, hospitality, logistics. His name appeared on permits and LLC filings that looked boring enough to escape attention. The shadow side moved parallel to the legal one, never intersecting on paper. That separation was his doctrine. Those who violated it disappeared, not dramatically, not publicly. They were simply removed from relevance. A club lost its lease. A supplier found their accounts frozen. A partner realized too late that every favor they depended on traced back to Kong Miho. By the time anyone connected the dots, the picture was complete. The Ice King, they called him. The nickname started as a joke. Someone said it after a negotiation where Miho stared across a table for 5 full minutes without blinking, then stood up and left. The deal collapsed within a week. The joke stuck. Ice because he never raised his voice. Ice because nothing seemed to touch him. Ice because emotions slid off him like rain off glass. The rumors grew from there. That he didn't drink, that he never laughed, that he'd turned down women whose families could have doubled his power overnight, that he'd once rejected a proposal so clean and profitable it left seasoned negotiators baffled. Why would a man with everything say no? The answer lived in a memory Miho never spoke about. Years earlier, long before the clubs, before the penthouse, before the city learned his name, there was a different man at the center of the Kong family. His father. The flash of it came without warning, like it always did. Rain streaking down a windshield, streetlights blurring into gold smears. The smell of leather and tobacco inside a car that had seen too many late nights. Miho sat in the passenger seat, younger, quieter, watching his father drive with one hand on the wheel and the other resting casually near the center console. They weren't arguing. They never argued in the car. A red light ahead. A shape stepping out too fast. A sound like thunder trapped in metal. The world fractured. Glass exploded inward. The car lurched. His father's body jerked once, then slumped. Blood soaked into fabric, dark and spreading. Miho reached for him, shouting words that never came out right, his hands slick, his chest burning with air that wouldn't fill. Sirens arrived later. Questions followed. Promises were made. None of it brought his father back. The men responsible were dealt with in time, slowly, thoroughly. But the damage had already been done. What remained was a lesson carved into Miho's bones. Attachment was a liability. Love created leverage. Women, especially, were used as access points in their world. Wives pressured, girlfriends followed, mistresses monitored. Miho removed the variable entirely. From the outside, it looked like arrogance, indifference. Some even said he lacked desire. The truth was simpler and far colder. He refused to give anyone a handle to grab him by. Years passed. Power consolidated. The Kong family transformed from a traditional operation into something leaner, quieter, better suited to modern New York. Miho's reputation hardened into myth. Then there was the private room incident, the one people still whispered about because it ended without a single raised hand. It happened in a back room above a high-end lounge near Herald Square. Neutral ground, technically. The kind of place where disputes were supposed to be resolved politely, with contracts and handshakes and carefully chosen words. The rival, an ambitious operator trying to muscle into Koreatown nightlife, arrived late on purpose. A test. He smiled too much, talked too long. Miho let him. The room smelled of polished wood and expensive liquor. Music from downstairs thudded faintly through the floor, bass steady as a heartbeat. 2 of Miho's men stood near the door, silent. The rival brought 3 of his own. They sat. "I think we can help each other," the rival said, leaning back, spreading his hands. "You expand. I get a piece. Everybody wins." Miho listened, fingers folded neatly on the table. "You're already operating on my blocks," the rival continued. "That's not sustainable." Miho tilted his head slightly. Not in confusion. In acknowledgement. "You didn't ask," Miho said calmly. The rival laughed. "I'm asking now." Silence stretched. Miho leaned forward just enough to shift the balance of the room. His voice didn't change. Still low. Still even. You're asking after you've taken, he said. That's not a question. That's a confession. The rival's smile faltered. Look, let's not make this dramatic. Miho raised one finger. The room froze. You think this neighborhood survives because of force, Miho continued. It survives because I make it predictable. Because people know what happens when rules are followed. And they know what happens when they aren't. He stood, buttoned his jacket with deliberate care. You've mistaken my restraint for hesitation, he said. You'll correct that mistake tonight. You'll close your 2 locations on 32nd. You'll sell the liquor license to the buyer my assistant sends you tomorrow. You'll keep your remaining business east of 6th Avenue. The rival stared at him. And, if I don't? Miho met his gaze without blinking. Then you'll spend the next year explaining to banks, landlords, and city offices why nothing you touch works anymore. No threat, no insult, just fact. Miho turned and walked out. By the following week, the rival complied. That was the status quo. A man who ruled without spectacle. A system that thrived on discipline. A city that adjusted itself around him. And somewhere in that machine, between the neon signs and the cash drawers, between the polished fronts and the quiet violence that never needed to announce itself, Kong Miho existed as something more than human. A constant, unmovable, until a random Tuesday afternoon in Koreatown, when a woman with golden brown skin, a stack of flyers, and no fear in her voice, stepped directly into his path. Before we go any further, before rules break and ice begins to crack, pause for a second. If you've ever walked through a city at night and felt the power humming beneath the surface, tap like. Because from this moment on, the legend stops being untouchable and starts becoming dangerous. The rule wasn't written anywhere. There was no memo, no carved warning, no line item in a code of conduct. But everyone in Miho's world knew it the same way sailors know storms, by instinct, by consequence, by the absence of survivors who ignored it. No women, no weakness. The lesson surfaced again one winter evening in Manhattan, when snow softened the city's edges and made everything look cleaner than it really was. The restaurant sat above street level, hidden behind frosted glass and a discreet brass plaque. Inside, the air smelled of pine cleaner and slow-cooked meat. A private dining room waited in the back, sealed off from the rest of the world by a sliding door and silence. Miho arrived on time. She was already there. The woman stood when he entered, smooth and confident, dressed in a charcoal coat that cost more than most people's rent. Her hair was pinned perfectly. Her smile knew exactly when to appear and when to retreat. Mr. Kong, she said, extending a hand. I'm glad you could make it. Miho looked at the hand. He did not take it. He sat instead, folding his coat over the chair with care, as if this meeting were routine rather than loaded with implication. You wanted to discuss expansion, he said. She laughed, lightly. Direct. I like that. She sat, crossing her legs. A folder rested on the table between them, unopened but heavy with promise permits, introductions, political insulation. Her family had influence in Queens, real influence, the kind that smoothed zoning problems and redirected attention when necessary. I'm proposing alignment, she said, public-facing, clean, a partnership that benefits both sides. Miho listened. She spoke about shared interests, about stability, about the advantages of unity in a city that punished isolation. She didn't mention marriage outright, but it hovered in the air between them, unspoken and obvious. When she finished, she waited. Miho took a sip of water, set the glass down. No, he said. The word landed flat. No anger, no apology. Her smile tightened. I don't think you understand what's being offered. I do, Miho replied. That's why the answer is no. She leaned forward. This isn't personal. He met her eyes for the first time. It is. Silence filled the room. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. This city doesn't reward men who stand alone. Miho stood. It buries men who depend, he said. He left without another word. By the time he reached the elevator, the consequences were already in motion. That night, the captains gathered. The room was windowless, lit by recessed lights that hummed faintly. A long table, familiar faces, men who had built the organization with him, who understood the balance of fear and respect that kept it alive. They didn't waste time. She was clean, one of them said. Too clean to turn away. Her family opens doors. Another added. Real ones. Miho sat at the head of the table, hands resting flat, eyes calm. She opens doors that swing both ways, he said. A murmur rippled through the room. This isn't about pleasure. A captain pressed. It's strategy. Miho looked at him, held the gaze until the man shifted. Strategy that involves my personal life stops being strategy, Miho said. It becomes leverage. One of the older captains leaned back. Every king marries eventually. Miho's voice stayed even. Every king who does gets poisoned in his sleep. Silence followed. You're being rigid, someone said. Not a challenge, a concern. Miho stood. My father was rigid, he said. Until he wasn't. No one spoke after that. They knew the story. Or parts of it. Enough to understand that this wasn't stubbornness. It was doctrine, forged in blood and memory. Later that night, after the building emptied and the city settled into its late-hour rhythm, Miho found his sister waiting for him. Hannah stood near the window of his office, arms crossed, coat still on reminder that this was not a social visit. The city glowed behind her. Lights scattered like constellations. You turned her down, she said. Miho loosened his tie. You heard. I always hear, Hannah replied. That's the problem. She stepped closer. Do you have any idea what you just rejected? Yes. Then explain it to me, she said. Not to your captains, not to the ghosts. To me. Miho looked at his sister, the only person who could stand in his space without permission. The only one who remembered him before the ice set in. Love is a variable, he said. Variables get exploited. Hannah shook her head. You're not talking about love. You're talking about fear. I'm talking about survival. She moved closer. You think avoiding attachment makes you safe. It doesn't. It just makes you alone. Miho turned away, staring out at the city. Somewhere below, a siren wailed, then faded. My father trusted someone he loved, Miho said quietly. That trust killed him. Hannah's voice softened. It wasn't love that killed him. It was the world. Miho didn't respond. She stepped beside him. You can't freeze everything forever, Miho. Ice cracks. Even steel bends. He finally looked at her. I won't repeat history, he said. I won't give this city another way to reach me. Hannah studied him, searching for something beneath the calm. And what happens when someone breaks the rule anyway? Miho's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then the rule breaks them, he said. She sighed, knowing she'd pushed as far as she could. One day, she said, you're going to meet someone who doesn't ask permission, someone who doesn't care about your rules. Miho returned his gaze to the city. Then they'll leave, he said. Hannah didn't argue. She just shook her head and walked out, leaving the door open behind her longer than necessary. Miho stood alone in the office, the hum of the city pressing in. No women, no weakness. The rule had kept him alive. It had kept his empire intact. It had turned grief into armor and memory into discipline. And somewhere, not far from Koreatown, fate was already arranging the one variable he hadn't planned for. A woman who didn't want power, didn't want protection, didn't want permission. A woman who would step straight through the rule and turn it into a war. Koreatown in the afternoon moved differently than it did at night. The neon still buzzed, but it felt exposed under daylight, colors too bright, promises too obvious. Delivery vans idled at curbs. Steam rose from grates and curled around ankles. Shopkeepers leaned in doorways, watching the street like it might answer back. Petra moved through it all with a stack of flyers tucked under her arm. Her boots slapped the concrete with purpose. Not hurried, not hesitant. She wore a black hoodie, sleeves pushed up, hair pulled back tight enough to stay out of her eyes. The flyers were matte, cheap paper, community event notices, support resources, things people either ignored or pretended to care about. She handed them out anyway. Free clinic this Saturday, she said to a man lighting a cigarette. Know Your Rights workshop. To a woman juggling grocery bags. Food drive. To anyone who would take the paper without flinching. Most didn't. Some smiled politely. Some waved her off. A few muttered things she chose not to hear. She'd learned the rhythm of rejection early. Learned how to keep walking without letting it slow her down. Learned how cities tested you to see if you belonged. Petra didn't ask permission to exist. She stopped near a corner where the sidewalk narrowed, boxed in by a beauty supply store on one side and a karaoke lounge on the other. The bass from inside thumped faintly through the walls. Even this early, a group of men stood nearby, suits too clean for the hour, eyes tracking everything. She approached anyway. "Excuse me," she said, holding out a flyer. One of them glanced at it, then at her. "We're good." Petra didn't pull her hand back. "It's for the neighborhood." "This is our neighborhood," he replied, voice flat. She met his stare. "Then you should care." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "Move along." Petra took a step back, but not away, just enough to breathe. Behind her, someone bumped into her shoulder hard enough to jolt the flyers loose. "Watch it, man," she snapped. Turning, the man didn't apologize. He looked down at her like she'd spoken out of turn in a language she wasn't supposed to know. "You need to pay attention," he said. Petra felt heat rise in her chest. "You ran into me." The men nearby stiffened. The air shifted. This wasn't how interactions went here. People knew when to lower their eyes, when to step aside. Petra didn't. Before the situation could calcify into something worse, a voice cut through it sharp, authoritative, impossible to ignore. "That's enough." Mrs. Lim emerged from the beauty supply store like a force of nature, apron still on, arms crossed. She'd been there for decades, watched gangs rise and fall, buried friends, outlived rivals. She pointed a finger at the man. "You want trouble? You bring it somewhere else." The man scoffed. "Stay out of it, Ajuma." Mrs. Lim stepped closer. "I own this sidewalk more than you ever will." The tension hung thick. Petra hadn't expected backup. She glanced at Mrs. Lim, surprised. "You okay?" Mrs. Lim asked, without looking at her. Petra nodded. "I'm fine." A low engine hum rolled down the street, then smooth, controlled, expensive. Conversation stalled. A black Mercedes eased to the curb like it belonged there. Tinted windows, no plates anyone could read from a distance. The men straightened instinctively. The rear door opened. Kong Miho stepped out. He moved without hurry, suit immaculate, expression unreadable. The street seemed to quiet around him, not silent, but subdued, like it had learned restraint. Petra had no idea who he was. She just saw a man who looked like he expected the world to arrange itself for him. Miho took in the scene in seconds. The scattered flyers, Mrs. Lim's defiant posture, Petra standing her ground, jaw set. His eyes paused on her. She met them. No fear, no recognition, just assessment. "What's going on?" Miho asked calmly. One of the men spoke quickly. She was causing a scene. Petra laughed once, sharp. "That's not what happened." Several heads turned toward her. "You didn't contradict statements in front of Miho." "Not if you knew who he was." Petra didn't. Miho looked at her again. "You want to explain?" Something about the question, neutral, almost curious, irritated her more than hostility would have. "I was handing out flyers," she said. "He ran into me, then tried to make it my fault." Miho glanced at the man. A subtle lift of his brow. The man swallowed. "It wasn't like that." Miho didn't respond. He stepped closer to Petra instead. "You shouldn't block the sidewalk," he said, not unkindly. Petra bristled. "I wasn't blocking anything." "You were," he replied evenly. She tilted her head. "And that justifies shoving people?" The street felt smaller now, eyes everywhere. Miho studied her like a problem he hadn't anticipated. Women usually avoided his gaze, or leaned into it. This one did neither. "You're new," he said. "I've been here long enough." Petra shot back. Mrs. Lim cleared her throat. "She's with the community center." Miho nodded once, acknowledging the information without reacting to it. "You should be careful," he told Petra. "This isn't a forgiving neighborhood." Petra laughed again. "Neither am I." The words landed wrong, too direct, too human. Before he could stop himself, Miho reached out and caught her wrist, not hard, but firm enough to freeze her in place. The contact was instant regret, heat, shock, a jolt that traveled straight up his arm and settled somewhere it didn't belong. Petra stiffened. "Let go." The command in her voice surprised him. Miho released her immediately. Silence rushed in to fill the space where his hand had been. "You don't get to touch me," Petra said quietly. Not angry. Certain. Something in Miho's chest shifted, subtle, dangerous. He nodded once. "You're right." The men stared. Mrs. Lim blinked. Miho reached into his jacket, pulled out a business card, and held it out not as an order, not as a threat. As a courtesy, he said. Petra hesitated, then took it. She didn't look at it. She tucked it into her pocket like it didn't matter. I hope your event goes well, Miho said. Petra studied him for a long moment. I hope you learn how to apologize. Then she bent to gather her flyers, nodded once to Mrs. Lim, and walked away back straight, pace steady. Miho watched her go, watched the rule crack clean down the center, because for the first time in years, the Ice King of Koreatown didn't feel in control. He felt seen, and as the Mercedes door closed behind him, Miho knew with absolute clarity, the collision wasn't over. Petra counted her money the same way every night, not because she expected it to change, but because pretending numbers might rearrange themselves felt better than accepting they wouldn't. She sat on the edge of her bed, mattress thin enough to feel the metal frame through the sheets, phone face down beside her. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old paint. A single lamp buzzed when she turned it on, casting light that felt tired. $43, 2 tens, 1 5, 8 singles. Coins pooled in her palm, cold and heavier than they should have been. She stacked them neatly, even though no one was there to see it. Petra had grown up learning that money didn't stretch, it endured. It survived. It waited until you needed it most, then disappeared. So she treated it with respect, even when it mocked her. The apartment around her was quiet in the way that made thoughts louder. No television, no music. Just the distant sound of traffic leaking in through a window that never quite closed all the way. She lay back and stared at the ceiling. Pride lived in her like a second spine. It was the reason she never asked for help. The reason she walked into neighborhoods where people looked at her like she'd taken a wrong turn. The reason she didn't flinch when men twice her size told her to move. Pride had kept her alive longer than comfort ever could. Her phone vibrated. A text message lit the screen. Landlord. Rent's late again. Need payment by Friday or we talk options. Petra exhaled slowly through her nose. Options was a polite word for eviction. She didn't reply. Not yet. She rolled onto her side and closed her eyes, letting memory bleed in the way it always did when she was exhausted enough to stop fighting it. Her mother sat at the small kitchen table in their old place, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched in minutes. The radio played softly some late-night talk show, voices filling space they didn't want to occupy alone. You don't have to do everything, her mother said, voice tired, but steady. Petra stood at the sink, scrubbing dishes already clean. Someone has to. Her mother smiled faintly. That's not strength. That's fear, pretending to be brave. Petra remembered the coughs. The way they came out of nowhere, sharp and wet, stealing air. Remembered learning to listen for them from the other side of walls. Remembered how illness didn't arrive with drama, it arrived with small changes. Missed days. Short breaths. Silence where laughter used to be. Hospitals. Paperwork. Bills that didn't care about circumstances. Her mother had taught her one thing without ever saying it outright. When the world senses weakness, it presses harder. Petra opened her eyes. She wasn't weak. She rolled off the bed and crossed the room, pulling the business card from her jacket pocket. It felt heavier now than it had on the street. Kong Miho. The name meant nothing to her earlier. Now it burned. She sat at the small desk by the window, opened her laptop, and typed carefully, slowly, like she was afraid the truth might hear her. The results populated fast. Nightlife, real estate, hospitality groups, articles that said nothing and everything at the same time, photos where he stood slightly apart from others, never smiling, never blurred. She clicked deeper. Forums, whispers, posts written in coded language by people who thought they were anonymous, stories that ended abruptly, businesses that closed overnight. Petra leaned back, heart thudding. So that was who he was. Fear arrived late, like it had to catch up to the math. She thought of his hand on her wrist. The way he'd let go immediately. The apology he hadn't been expected to give. Fear said, you should disappear. Survival said, you already live on the edge. She refreshed the page, scrolling through details until her eyes ached. Power mapped out in ownership charts and quiet partnerships. A man who didn't need to shout because the city listened anyway. Petra laughed softly. Of course it had to be someone like that. Her phone buzzed again. Landlord. Need to know tonight if you're staying. Petra stared at the screen, jaw tightening. She thought about safety. About rules. About how every smart decision she'd ever made had still landed her here counting money, choosing which bill could wait. She thought about her mother's hands shaking slightly when she signed hospital forms, about the way dignity mattered even when nothing else was left. Petra typed, "Petra, I'm staying. I'll have it." She didn't know how yet. She closed the laptop and stood, pacing the room. The city outside glowed indifferent. Somewhere down the block, laughter spilled out of a bar. Somewhere else, someone was making a deal that would never touch her life. Unless it did. She pulled the card out again, finally looking at it. Clean, minimal, a number, no address. Petra understood leverage. Not the kind men like him used, but the kind life forced on you when options narrowed. Pride mattered more than safety because safety was an illusion she'd never been afforded. She sat back down, phone in hand, thumb hovering. Then she stopped. Not yet. She needed to think. To calculate. To make sure this wasn't desperation dressing itself up as courage. Petra lay back on the bed again, staring at the ceiling. If you're watching this right now, pause for a moment. What time is it where you are? Because somewhere in New York, at a late hour that felt earlier than it should, a woman with $43 and no exit was deciding whether to step closer to the most dangerous man she'd ever met, and whether pride would save her, or cost her everything. Club Diamond announced itself before you ever reached the door. The bass wasn't loud, it was controlled, a steady pulse that traveled up through the sidewalk and into bone. A line curved along the building. People dressed for visibility, not comfort. The bouncer's eyes missed nothing. The security cameras didn't blink. Petra paused across the street, hands in her jacket pockets, watching. She'd dressed plainly on purpose. Black jeans, boots, no jewelry, nothing that suggested she belonged inside, or that she wanted to. The name on the building glowed white against glass so dark it reflected the city back at itself. Diamond, clean, sharp, untouchable. She crossed when the light changed. Inside, the air shifted instantly. Cool, filtered, expensive. The smell of citrus cleaner mixed with perfume and alcohol. Light refracted off polished surfaces, making everything feel slightly unreal. A hostess looked up. Name? Petra, Winston. The woman checked a tablet, then nodded once. This way. They moved past velvet ropes and through a corridor that narrowed deliberately, forcing awareness of space. The music softened as they approached a door guarded by two men who didn't speak. The door opened. Miho stood near the bar inside the private lounge, jacket off, sleeves rolled once. The lighting here was warmer, intentional. Leather booths, frosted glass, no windows. He turned as Petra entered. "You came," he said. "You asked?" she replied. He studied her outfit, then her face. "You're early. I don't like waiting." A corner of his mouth almost moved. "Almost?" He gestured to the bar. "Drink?" "No." Another almost smile, gone before it formed. They sat across from each other, a low table between them. No menus, no interruptions. "This place is yours?" Petra asked, scanning the room. "Part of it," Miho said. "Enough." She nodded. "It's efficient. That's a compliment. It's an observation." He leaned back slightly. "You did your research." Petra met his gaze. "Enough to know this isn't a social call." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." The music from the main floor filtered in faintly, muted by layers of design and intention. Miho folded his hands. "I don't usually repeat offers," he said. "You didn't make one yet." "I will." He slid a folder across the table. "Not pushed. Placed. Come work for me." Petra didn't touch it. "In what capacity?" she asked. "Community liaison," Miho said smoothly. "Outreach, events, public-facing initiatives." She laughed once. "You don't need help with optics?" "I need control over variables," he replied. "You're one of them." Petra's eyes narrowed. "That's honest." Miho inclined his head. "It's accurate." She finally opened the folder. The pages inside were crisp, clean, salary figures that made her chest tighten. Benefits, flexibility, clauses, written by people who understood power. "You don't know me," she said. "I know enough," Miho replied. "You don't fold when pressured. You don't ask permission. You don't take money you haven't earned." She looked up sharply. "You following me?" "I pay attention," he said. "There's a difference." Petra closed the folder. "Why?" Miho didn't answer immediately. He stood instead. "Walk with me." They moved through the club, up a private staircase, into an office that overlooked nothing but darkness. The city existed somewhere beyond reinforced glass. "This is where I work," he said, "not where I entertain." The office was spare. Desk, chairs, no personal photos, no distractions. "I'm offering you proximity," Miho said. "Not ownership, not protection." Petra turned to face him. "That's a lie." He didn't deny it. "I'm offering structure," he corrected. "Stability. And safety," she said. Miho's jaw tightened slightly. "I don't promise what I can't control." Petra stepped closer, not invading his space, but refusing to stay small. "I don't want to be owned," she said. "I don't want favors. I don't want to owe you." "You won't," Miho said. "You'll work." She shook her head. "That's not enough." She opened the folder again, flipping to the contract. "I set conditions," she said. Miho raised an eyebrow. "You're in no position to." She looked up, unblinking. "Then this meeting's over." Silence pressed in. Miho studied her like a chessboard that had just changed shape. "Go on," he said. Petra took a breath. "I keep my outside work. Community stuff. No interference." "Agreed. I don't attend private meetings unless they relate directly to my role." "Agreed. I don't lie for you," she continued. "I don't cover for crimes. I don't get used as a shield." Miho considered. "You won't be asked to." "And," Petra said, voice steady, "you don't touch me again without consent. Ever." The words landed hard. Miho held her gaze. "Understood?" She closed the folder. "Then I'll consider it." He stepped closer, just enough for the air between them to change. "You know what you're accepting," he said quietly. Petra nodded. "Danger." "And?" he asked. "Opportunity," she replied. Miho extended his hand, not as a test, as a choice. Petra looked at it for a long moment. Then she shook it. The contact was brief, controlled, charged. Miho released first. "Welcome to Diamond," he said. Petra turned toward the door, heart pounding not with fear, but with clarity. She didn't look back, and Miho watched her go, fully aware of the truth neither of them would say out loud. He had offered safety without naming it. She had accepted danger without flinching, and the balance between them had already begun to shift. Club Diamond had always been efficient. Before Petra, it ran like a machine, precise, profitable, cold. The music hit on time. The lights shifted on schedule. The bartenders poured exact measures. Security moved crowds with quiet authority. It worked, but it didn't live. Petra felt that absence on her first full night working the floor. She stood near the DJ booth, clipboard tucked under her arm, watching the room the way a doctor watches a patient, eyes tracing patterns, not faces. Who lingered? Who left early? Who hovered at the edges like they were waiting for permission to belong? The crowd skewed, expensive and narrow. Too polished. Too safe. "This place feels like it's holding its breath," she said to Maya, one of the senior bartenders. Maya snorted. "It always does." "Why?" "Because nobody wants to mess up," Maya replied. "Messing up here gets remembered." Petra nodded slowly. Then she stepped onto the floor. The changes didn't come all at once. They never did. First, it was the music. Petra worked with the DJs, not demanding, not begging, watching how the crowd moved, when shoulders loosened, when feet tapped unconsciously. "Don't chase hype," she told them. "Build momentum. Let them trust you." She blended genres, hip-hop into Afrobeat, R&B into house, familiar enough to feel safe, new enough to feel electric. The floor stayed full longer. Then came the lighting. She asked the tech crew to warm it just slightly. Less interrogation room, more heartbeat. She added color gradients instead of harsh transitions. People stayed an extra drink. Then the faces changed. Petra reached out to promoters Miho had never bothered with. Smaller names, community organizers, creators who spoke to audiences Diamond had ignored. She didn't ask permission. She sent invites. On Thursdays, the crowd skewed younger. On Saturdays, broader. Different accents, different skin tones, different energy. Diamond stopped being a place people came to be seen. It became a place people came to feel. By week 2, the numbers told the story. Bar revenue up 23%. VIP retention climbing. Social engagement exploding, comments, tags, shares. Petra tracked it all. Spreadsheets open late into the night, her foot tapping under the desk as music pulsed below. She caught things others missed. A bartender overpouring at one station, a security guard lingering too long near certain tables, a promoter skimming percentages that didn't add up. She brought it all to Miho without ceremony. "This doesn't track," she said one afternoon, dropping a report on his desk. Miho glanced at it once, then again. "Who else saw this?" he asked. "No one," Petra replied. "Yet." He picked up the phone, made one call. By evening, the issue was gone. Quietly, staff noticed, not because of what changed, but because of how. Petra never raised her voice, never threatened. She learned names, remembered shifts, covered for people when life hit them sideways. She brought food into the break room on busy nights, checked on dancers when creeps got bold, pulled bartenders aside privately instead of embarrassing them publicly. Loyalty shifted without anyone announcing it. When Petra walked the floor, people straightened, not out of fear, but respect. And from the shadows above, Miho watched. He stood behind tinted glass in his office more often now, hands clasped behind his back, eyes tracking her movement through the club like a current he couldn't control. She belonged here in a way he hadn't anticipated, not because she fit his world, because she changed it. Captain J noticed too. He waited until Petra left one night, the door to Miho's office closing softly behind her. "She's everywhere," Jay said carefully. Miho didn't turn. "She's doing her job. She has access," Jay continued. "Staff listens to her. She walks into your office without knocking. That's intentional." Jay hesitated. "Boss, we don't usually let outsiders." "She's not an outsider," Miho cut in. Jay's jaw tightened. "She's new." "So was I," Miho replied, finally turning. His gaze was level, cold, final. "Once." Jay exhaled slowly. "People are starting to ask questions." Miho stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then answer them." "With what?" "The truth," Miho said. "She makes us money. She keeps things clean. She sees problems before they become threats." Jay studied him. "And if someone sees her as leverage?" The temperature dropped. Miho's expression didn't change, but the air did. "Then they misunderstand the equation," he said quietly. Jay nodded once. Message received. On the floor below, Petra laughed at something the DJ said, head tipped back, braids swinging. The sound carried faintly upward, soft but unmistakable. Miho looked away. Enemies noticed too. Rival promoters complained their crowds were thinning. Other clubs tried copying Diamond's playlists, its vibe, its inclusivity, without understanding the intention behind it. It didn't work, because Petra wasn't a formula. She was presence. She made the club breathe. And breath meant vulnerability. By the end of the first month, Diamond wasn't just profitable. It was visible. And in Miho's world, visibility always came at a cost. The invitation didn't come with drama. No flowers, no speech, no lingering stare. It came through the intercom at 8:47 p.m., when Petra was finishing notes from a vendor call. "Petra," Miho's voice said, calm and even. "Come upstairs when you're done." That was all. No reason given. Her stomach tightened anyway. She saved her file, smoothed her jacket, and walked to the elevator. As it rose, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. Tired eyes, hair pulled back, lip gloss reapplied out of habit rather than vanity. She reminded herself of the rules. He was her boss. This was work, nothing else. Miho was standing by the window when she entered, Manhattan glowing behind him like a second city made of glass and nerve. He didn't turn right away. "Sit," he said. She did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The club's bass hummed faintly through the floor, distant but constant, like a pulse. "You've changed the trajectory of this place," Miho said finally. "Revenue, reputation, stability. That's what you hired me to do." "Yes." He turned then, eyes settling on her. "And you exceeded it." He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, slid a document across the surface toward her. "A raise," he said, effective immediately. Petra glanced down. The number made her inhale sharply despite herself. "That's generous." "It's accurate," he replied. "And I'm taking you to dinner tomorrow night." She looked up. "Dinner. Not lunch, not a meeting. Dinner?" Her instinctive response rose fast. "That's not necessary." "I didn't say it was," Miho said. "I said I'm doing it." She held his gaze. As my employer? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back against the desk, arms crossed, studying her with the same focus he gave contracts and threats. I own a restaurant, he said. Private room. No staff except who I trust. I'd like to celebrate what you've done. The words were careful, controlled, but something lived underneath them. And if I say no? Petra asked. Miho's jaw tightened just slightly. Then I'll respect it. She searched his face, looking for pressure, for manipulation. She didn't find it. Tomorrow, she said quietly. One dinner. We talk like adults. A pause. Agreed. He arrived at 7 sharp the next night. Not a driver, not an entourage, just Miho, alone behind the wheel of his Mercedes. When Petra stepped onto the sidewalk, his breath caught despite his discipline. She wore a deep burgundy dress, simple, clean lines, nothing flashy. Gold at her wrists, confidence she didn't need to perform. He opened the door for her. You look, he stopped himself. Appropriate. She smiled. You almost said something else. Almost, he admitted. The restaurant sat tucked between 2 unmarked buildings, discreet in a way that suggested it didn't need to advertise. Inside, the lighting was low and intentional. The air smelled like toasted sesame and heat from the kitchen. They were led into a private room and left alone. The door closed softly behind them. For the first time since they'd met, there were no witnesses, no hierarchy, no staff pretending not to notice. Just 2 people at a table. Wine was poured. Plates arrived in quiet succession. Petra took it in the care, the precision, the intimacy of the space. You own this place, she said. Yes, and people bow to you here too. They respect the work, Miho replied. Fear is optional. She tilted her head. Is it? He didn't smile. In my world, fear keeps people alive. Respect keeps them loyal. And which one do you want from me? The question landed between them, sharp and honest. Miho set his chopsticks down. I don't want you to fear me. But people do. Yes. And you're okay with that. I accept it, he corrected. There's a difference. Petra studied him. Does it ever bother you? Being untouchable? He considered the question. It isolates, he said finally. But isolation is safer than attachment. Her fingers tightened around her glass. That sounds lonely. It's efficient. She shook her head. That's not the same thing. They ate in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't awkward, just heavy with unspoken truths. Why me? Petra asked quietly. Out of everyone you could have hired. Everyone you could be sitting across from. Miho looked at her, really looked. You don't submit, he said. You observe, you calculate, and you don't mistake fear for respect. She swallowed. And that makes me useful? It makes you dangerous, he corrected. In the best way. The conversation drifted childhood fragments, city stories, small confessions. He told her about his sister. About responsibility arriving too early, she spoke about juggling jobs, about learning to disappear in plain sight. Eventually, the plates were cleared. The space between them felt charged now, alive. Miho stood first, moving closer to the window. Petra followed, drawn by gravity. She didn't pretend not to feel. The city stretched below them, restless and awake. This is where I'm supposed to stop, Miho said quietly. Stop what? Wanting more. She turned to face him. And do you? Yes. The word was immediate. Honest. Petra's pulse raced. This isn't smart. No. This could cost you. Yes. Everything? He met her eyes. Didn't flinch. Yes. Silence. Then Petra stepped closer. Then tell me to leave, she said. Tell me this was a mistake, and I will. Miho didn't move. Petra, he said, voice low. I have lived by rules that kept me alive, rules that buried parts of me. And you? He stopped. She waited. You make those rules feel small. Her breath hitched. He reached out, not grabbing, not claiming, just resting his hand near her waist, waiting. Tell me to stop, he said. She didn't. She closed the distance instead. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was controlled, focused, years of restraint breaking cleanly, deliberately. His hand came up to her jaw, steady, reverent. Petra's fingers curled into his jacket, grounding herself in something solid. When they parted, both of them were breathing hard. Miho rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said. I know. My enemies will notice. I know. They'll see you as a weakness. She lifted her chin. I'm not weak. A flicker of something like pride crossed his face. No, he agreed. You're not. He exhaled slowly. I'm risking everything, Miho said. For this. For you. Petra met his gaze, unafraid. Then don't do it halfway. The city hummed outside, unaware of the line that had just been crossed. And Miho, the Ice King of Koreatown, didn't step back. He stepped in. Ramsay Xiao believed in order, not the kind written into law books or printed on glossy mission statements. His order was older, quieter, heavier. It lived in unspoken rules passed from one table to another, from father to son, from men who measured power by how little they had to explain themselves. He believed the city belonged to those who had taken it early and never apologized for keeping it. From his office above a private gambling room in Midtown, Ramsay watched New York like a chessboard he'd been playing since the 90s. Buildings rose and fell. Crews changed names. New faces came in loud and left fast. But families endured. Or they were supposed to. The problem with Kong Miho wasn't territory. Territory could be negotiated. The problem was evolution. Miho didn't behave like the old guard. He didn't brag, didn't posture, didn't waste time. He ran legitimate fronts with ruthless efficiency, paid taxes without complaint, and kept violence clean and rare. When he moved, it was decisive. When he spoke, people listened. Worst of all, he didn't ask permission. Ramsay had tried to bind him early. Invitations, dinners, strategic smiles. A daughter raised to understand what marriages were really for. Miho declined. Once politely, then firmly, then without explanation. And now there was her. The reports came in fragments at first. A new energy at Club Diamond. A shift in crowd composition. A woman young, visible, close. Too close. Ramsay listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on nothing. Who is she? He asked finally. A manager, one of his lieutenants replied. Handles promotion. Social strategy. And her name? Petra Winston. The name meant nothing to him. The description did. Black, outspoken, seen at Miho's side. Ramsay exhaled slowly through his nose. She's not family, he said. She's not protected by blood. That makes her leverage. Or bait, another man offered. Ramsay smiled thinly. Same thing. The meeting was scheduled under false pretenses, territory overlap, licensing issues, the kind of discussion that had solved itself a dozen times before. Neutral ground, private building, trusted security. Miho arrived precisely on time. No access, no delay. He wore black, simple, unadorned. His presence quieted the room without effort, like oxygen thinning. Ramsay stood to greet him, smile practiced and cold. Kong Miho, he said, you look well. Miho inclined his head. Ramsay Xiao. They sat. Tea was poured. Doors closed. For a moment, the conversation stayed where it was supposed to: numbers, venues, expansion. Ramsay listened, nodded, waited. Then he leaned back. I hear congratulations are in order, he said casually. Miho's gaze didn't flicker. On? Your personal life, Ramsay replied. You've been seen, quite openly. The air shifted. Miho set his cup down. If you have a business concern, voice it. Ramsay chuckled softly. Always straight to the point. That's what makes you impressive. He paused. And reckless. Miho's eyes hardened. Choose your words. I am, Ramsay said, carefully. He folded his hands. You've built something remarkable, modern, efficient, but you're forgetting why families like ours survived this long. Miho said nothing. Attachment invites pressure, Ramsay continued. Visibility invites challenge. And women, he waved a dismissive hand, are distractions. Miho leaned forward slightly. You invited me here to discuss territory. I invited you to remind you of reality, Ramsay replied. You're walking around with a weakness. Silence. She's a nobody, Ramsay added. A street-level girl you elevated beyond her place. It sends the wrong message. Miho stood, slowly, deliberately. The chairs behind his captains shifted, tension snapping tight. My personal life, Miho said evenly, is not your concern. Ramsay didn't rise. He smiled instead. Everything that affects power is my concern. Miho stepped closer to the table. Then, listen carefully. His voice dropped. Petra Winston is under my protection. Ramsey's smile faltered just slightly. She is not leverage, Miho continued. She is not a statement, and she is not available for your analysis. Ramsey's eyes narrowed. You'd risk conflict over this? I'd end it, Miho corrected. The room felt suddenly smaller. You think choosing her makes you strong? Ramsey asked. It makes you predictable. Miho straightened. It makes me honest. Ramsey laughed once, sharp and incredulous. You're throwing away decades of tradition for a feeling. For a person, Miho said. The distinction landed like a blade. Ramsey stood now, anger breaking through polish. You forget your place. Miho met his stare without blinking. I built my place. They stood there, two philosophies staring each other down. Finally, Miho turned toward the door. This meeting is over. Ramsey's voice followed him. You've chosen your side. Miho paused at the threshold. I always have. The doors closed behind him. Ramsey remained standing long after the room emptied, jaw tight, mind racing. The city hadn't changed, but the game had. And as far as Ramsey Xiao was concerned, Kong Miho had just made the oldest mistake there was. He had let love stand where fear used to be. War didn't need to be declared. It had already been ceded. The elevator rose in silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that pressed against the ears, that made every mechanical hum feel louder than it should. Petra stood beside Miho, hands folded in front of her, eyes on the numbers blinking upward. 17, 18, 19. She could feel it on him. Not anger, not fear. Pressure. The doors opened into his private floor above Club Diamond. No music here. No bass bleeding through the walls. Just thick carpet, muted lighting, and the faint smell of cedar and old paper. This was where decisions were made. Where men disappeared without noise. Miho didn't speak as he walked. He loosened his coat, set it on the chair by the window, poured 2 glasses of water without asking. Petra watched his hands. Steady, always steady. That scared her more than rage ever could. What happened? She asked. Miho didn't answer immediately. He handed her a glass, then leaned back against the desk, eyes on the skyline. Outside, Koreatown glowed neon signs buzzing in Hangul and English, taxis slicing through wet streets, life continuing without any idea how fragile it was. Ramsey Xiao, Miho said finally. The name hit her like a dropped plate. She'd learned enough by now to recognize it. Old money, old violence, the kind of man whose shadow extended further than his reach. He knows about me, she said. Yes. How? Miho's jaw tightened. Because I didn't hide you, Petra swallowed. Is that bad? He turned to her then. Fully. No masks. It's dangerous. The word hung between them. She took a breath. Then I'll step back. Miho's eyes sharpened. No, I mean it, she said quickly. I didn't come into your world to get you killed, or start a war. You didn't start anything, he said. But I can end it, Petra insisted. I can go back to being invisible. I've done it my whole life. Miho crossed the room in 3 strides. Not aggressive, intentional. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and restrained, like smoke caught in fabric. Ramsey didn't threaten you, he said. He threatened me. That's worse. He said you're a weakness, Miho continued. That loving you makes me predictable. Petra laughed softly, without humor. He's not wrong. Miho's hand came up not to touch her, but to brace against the wall beside her head. He is wrong, Miho said quietly, because he thinks weakness is something that can be exploited. Petra met his gaze. And you don't? I think weakness is something men invent when they're afraid of losing control. Silence. She searched his face, looking for cracks, for doubt. Found none. What did he say? She asked. Miho exhaled. He reminded me of tradition, of hierarchy, of what happens when someone forgets their place. And I told him I'd end him if he touched you. Petra's breath caught. Miho. He told me he'd burn this city before letting me change the rules. There it was. The warning. Petra stepped back, heart pounding. This isn't just about us anymore. It never was, Miho replied. She ran a hand through her hair, pacing now. You're talking about real people getting hurt. Staff, neighbors, people who didn't sign up for this. Miho watched her move, eyes tracking every step. You think I don't know that? Then why won't you let me go? Because the truth had teeth. Miho straightened. Because letting you go wouldn't stop him. Petra froze. He'd see it as confirmation. Miho continued. That pressure works. That love is something to be used. She turned back to him slowly. So what this is defiance? Yes. And loyalty? Miho nodded once. Is violence? The words were calm, measured, terrifying. Petra wrapped her arms around herself. I never wanted to be anyone's symbol. You're not, Miho said. You're my choice. That's worse, she whispered. He softened then, just slightly. When my father died, Miho said, it wasn't the bullet that killed him. It was hesitation. He loved someone who begged him to step back. He listened. Petra's chest tightened. I swore I'd never repeat that mistake, Miho said. No half measures, no retreats, disguised as mercy. She looked at him, really looked. You're choosing me over peace. I'm choosing truth over illusion. Petra laughed again, shaky. You really are insane. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Only about you. She stepped closer, close enough now that their foreheads almost touched. If this ends badly, she began. It will end, Miho said. Not badly. And if I get hurt? Miho's voice dropped. Then the city will bleed. There was no bravado in it. No threat for effect. Just a promise. Petra closed her eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far below, swallowed by traffic and rain. When she opened her eyes, her voice was steady. Then don't lie to me, she said. Not once. Not about danger. Not about blood. Miho nodded. I won't. And if I say stop, I'll listen, he said. But I won't run. She reached for his hand. This time, he let her. Their fingers intertwined, not gently, but firmly. Like an agreement signed without paper. Downstairs, Club Diamond pulsed on, unaware that lines had been crossed that could never be erased. Somewhere else in the city, Ramsey Shao was already moving pieces. But in that quiet room above the noise, Miho and Petra stood together, knowing one truth above all others. Love, once chosen openly, was no longer soft. It was a weapon, and New York was about to find out what happened when loyalty stopped asking permission. The lights died mid-beat. Not a flicker, not a warning tremor. 1 second, Club Diamond was alive, bass rolling through bone, blue strobes cutting bodies into fragments, glass sweating under warm hands, and the next, everything dropped into black. No music, no color, just the sudden, total absence of sound, like the city itself had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe. For half a second, no one moved. Then the crowd reacted the way crowds always do, confusion first, laughter second. Phones came out. Someone whistled. A woman near the bar joked about a fuse blowing. Security radios crackled to life. Sharp whispers slicing through the dark. Petra stood near the side corridor, clipboard tucked under her arm, already counting exits in her head. Power outages happened, but not like this. No emergency lights. No backup glow. No hum of generators kicking in. Just black. Her instincts tightened. She lifted her phone. No signal. Not even a bar. Jay, she called, keeping her voice even. Where are we on backup? No answer. A ripple of unease moved through the room, not panic yet, but something colder. People were starting to feel the wrongness of it. The bass wasn't just gone. It had been cut. Precision, not failure. Petra stepped toward the hallway leading to the service offices. That was her mistake. A hand caught her wrist out of the dark. She reacted instantly, twisting, driving her elbow back, but the grip didn't loosen. Another hand came up behind her, clamping something damp and sharp-smelling over her mouth and nose. Chemical, bitter, sweet, in the worst way. Her breath hit it, and rebounded. She tried to scream. Nothing came out. Her legs kicked, heels scraping uselessly against concrete. She tasted metal. Her vision flared white at the edges. No, not like this. A voice hissed close to her ear, low, male, amused. Easy. This'll only take a second. She bit down. Hard. The man cursed, grip tightening, cloth pressed harder against her face. The smell flooded her head now, crawling behind her eyes, pouring into her lungs. Her body betrayed her first strength draining from her arms, fingers going numb, the floor tilting sideways. She fought anyway. She always did. But the dark was thick, and there were too many hands now. They moved with coordination, with rehearsal. One lifted her weight, another guided her legs, another secured her head. She caught a glimpse of the club through the open doorway, phones raised. Security struggling to organize, confusion blooming into fear. Then the hallway swallowed her. The last thing she heard was the soft click of a door closing. And then, silence. Across the city, in a windowless room that smelled of cheap cologne and cold coffee, Ramsey Xiao's men watched a clock. 3 of them sat around a folding table, jackets still on, guns untouched. No rush, no tension. They'd done this before. One checked his watch. 2 minutes. Another smirked. Told you, the generator override would work. They won't notice until it's done, the third said. Place is loud. People drunk, confused. A phone buzzed. The man at the head of the table glanced at the screen, nodded once. Package, secured. No cheers, no relief. Just confirmation. She put up a fight? Someone asked. Always, the man replied. Didn't matter. He leaned back, stretching his neck. Miho's gonna lose his mind. That's the point, another said. You don't beat a guy like him head on. You take away what makes him human. A pause. You think he'll come? Someone asked. The leader laughed quietly. He won't have a choice. Back at Club Diamond, emergency lights finally flickered on thin red strips, bleeding along the floor, bathing the room in a warning glow. Too late. Security was shouting now, trying to corral the crowd, but panic had arrived. Someone pushed. Glass shattered. A woman screamed near the bar. Captain J burst through the side corridor, eyes scanning. Petra, he yelled. No answer. He reached the service door. Locked. His hand went to his radio. Miho, we have a situation. Static. Then Miho's voice cut through, low and sharp. Say it. Jay swallowed. She's gone. Silence on the line. Not disbelief. Calculation. How long? Miho asked. Under a minute, Jay replied. This was clean. Miho closed his eyes where he stood alone in his office. City lights smeared across the glass like blood under rain. Ramsey Xiao hadn't burned the city. He'd turned off the lights first. And somewhere in the dark, Petra Winston was waking up to a nightmare that had been planned down to the second by men who believed the game was already over. They were wrong, but they wouldn't understand that until it was far too late. The door blew inward on the third charge. Not a dramatic explosion, no fireball, no echoing boom. Just a compressed thunderclap that punched the steel inward, tore the hinges loose, and sent the slab skidding across concrete like a dying animal. Red emergency light spilled into the warehouse. Smoke followed. Then boots. Measured, heavy, purposeful. Petra Winston woke to pain before sound. Her spine screamed first rope biting into skin, wrists numb and burning at the same time. Her mouth tasted like copper and chemicals. The chair beneath her was metal, cold even through her clothes, bolted to the floor. Every breath scraped. The warehouse smelled like oil, damp cardboard, and old rust. Somewhere, water dripped steadily, each drop too loud in the silence. Her head lifted a fraction. Red light pulsed overhead, rotating slow, painting the room in warning strokes. Shadows jumped and collapsed with every rotation. Then she heard it. Boots on concrete. Not rushed. Not sloppy. A rhythm. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. Someone shouted in Korean sharp, commanding, not panicked, not angry, controlled. Another voice answered, higher, afraid. A gunshot cracked. Close. Petra flinched, chair rattling, rope tearing deeper into her skin. She tried to scream, but her throat barely worked. What came out was air and pain. The boots moved faster now. Gunfire answered short, brutal punctuation. Not sprays, not guesses. Each shot had a destination. A body hit the floor to her left. She felt the vibration through the concrete. Another followed. Closer this time, something warm splashing against her ankle. She squeezed her eyes shut. Miho. The name formed in her head without sound. Footsteps stopped. A silhouette filled the doorway at the far end of the warehouse, framed in red light and smoke. Tall, broad shoulders. Gun already raised, arms steady like it had never learned to shake. Kong Miho stepped inside. His face was calm, too calm. His eyes moved first fast, surgical. Corners, rafters, behind crates, under the catwalk. Clear. Someone called behind him. Miho advanced anyway. A man lunged from behind a stack of pallets, screaming, gun wild. Miho pivoted without breaking stride. One shot, center mass. The man folded mid-step, surprise frozen on his face. Another rushed from the right. Miho dropped to one knee, fired twice upward. The second shot caught the man's throat. He fell without sound, hands clawing uselessly at the air. The warehouse fell quiet again, except for the red light, except for Petra's breathing. Miho saw her. The world narrowed. Chair bolted to the floor. Rope cinched too tight. Her head bowed. Hair stuck to her face with sweat and blood. For the first time that night, his gun trembled. Just once. He crossed the distance in seconds, dropping to her level, scanning her with his free hand, neck, shoulders, wrists. Petra, he said. Her name, spoken like an anchor. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw him through red light and blur, but she knew him, knew the line of his jaw. The stillness that meant danger was already over. Hey, she rasped. You're late. Something broke behind his eyes. I'm here, Miho said. A scream tore through the warehouse. Not hers. A man burst from behind the office door, wild-eyed, gun raised with shaking hands. Miho turned and fired without looking. The body hit the wall and slid down, leaving a dark smear. Miho holstered his weapon and pulled a knife from his boot. One clean slice. The rope fell away. Petra collapsed forward into his chest, breath shuddering out of her like she'd been holding it for days. He caught her, held her, for exactly one heartbeat. Then the world came back. Get her out, Miho said, voice iron again. Now. She shook her head weakly. Don't leave. I won't, he said. But we're not done. Another voice crackled through the radio. We've got movement outside. Vans. Miho looked down at Petra. Her face was pale under the red light, eyes too bright, jaw clenched against pain. Can you stand? He asked. She nodded. Lied. He lifted her anyway, one arm under her knees, the other behind her back. She weighed nothing. That scared him more than anything else. Gunfire erupted outside. Automatic, undisciplined. Miho turned, barking orders in Korean, short, lethal syllables. His men moved like extensions of his will, spreading, flanking, drawing fire. A bullet sparked off a steel beam inches from his head. Miho didn't slow. He carried Petra through the side corridor, boots slipping slightly on blood. Another man stepped into their path, shotgun raised. Miho twisted, using Petra's body to shield instinctively, then corrected mid-motion, spinning her away, firing one-handed. The blast took the man off his feet. Petra buried her face against Miho's chest, ears ringing, heart slamming. They reached the loading bay. Cold night air rushed in, sharp and clean. Sirens wailed somewhere far off too far. A van screeched to a halt. Door slid open. Go, Miho said. Petra clutched his coat. Miho. He looked down at her. I'm not finished, he said. She saw it then, the cold returning, sealing something shut inside him. Whatever mercy had existed was gone now. She nodded. Let go. The van door slammed. As it pulled away, Petra looked back through the window. Miho was already turning toward the warehouse, already walking back into the red light. Inside, the last man dropped his weapon, hands shaking, knees buckling. Please, he said in English. I was just following. Miho stopped in front of him. The red light washed over their faces, turning everything into warning. Who ordered it? Miho asked. The man sobbed. Xiao. Ramsey, Xiao. Miho nodded once. The man looked up, hope flickering. You got her back. It's over, right? Miho raised his gun. No, he said. The shot echoed long after the body fell. Outside, the red light kept spinning. Somewhere in the city, someone screamed. And somewhere else, a war finally stopped pretending it hadn't started. The van smelled like antiseptic and rubber mats. Petra lay on the bench seat, knees drawn up, blanket pulled to her shoulders. The city slid past the tinted windows and smeared lights. Queens, then the bridge, then Manhattan again, each mile putting distance between her and the warehouse that still echoed in her bones. Miho sat across from her, not speaking, not moving. His hands were on his knees, open, empty. They were shaking. It was subtle at first, just a tremor in the fingers, like nerves cooling after cold water. Then it spread. Wrist, forearm, a vibration he couldn't stop. Petra noticed immediately. Hey, she said softly. No response. She pushed herself upright despite the protest in her ribs, slid closer, and reached for his hands. They were cold. Miho, she said again. Look at me. His eyes lifted, focused, present. Are you hurt? He asked. The question came out flat, stripped of everything but necessity. She almost laughed. She touched her temple, then her side. I'll live. His jaw clenched. The shaking worsened. That's not what I asked, he said. She leaned in until their foreheads touched, breath to breath. I'm here, she said. You did that. For a moment, the mask cracked. Miho's shoulders dropped an inch. Air left him in a shuddering exhale he didn't seem aware of taking. His hands tightened around hers like they were the only solid thing left in the world. I lost control, he said quietly. Petra pulled back just enough to look at him. No. You used it. I promised I wouldn't let you see that side of me, he replied. You promised not to lie, she said. You didn't. The van slowed. Turned. Pulled into a private underground garage beneath a medical office that didn't appear on any public directory. Doors opened. Voices murmured. A doctor waited without questions. As they helped Petra onto a gurney, Miho stayed close, too close hand, hovering near her shoulder, like he was afraid she'd vanish if he let go. She caught his sleeve. Stay, she said. I'm not going anywhere, he replied. They moved her into a clean room with soft lights. No sirens, no chaos, just quiet efficiency. The doctor spoke in low tones. Vitals, pupils, bruising, rope burns cleaned and dressed. Miho stood against the wall, still shaking. When they were alone again, Petra watched him pace, once, twice, then stop. There's a choice, Miho said. She knew what he meant without asking. Ramsey, she said. He nodded. My men are waiting. I can end this tonight. How? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Petra swung her legs off the bed slowly, ignoring the ache. She crossed the room and took his hands again, forcing him to still. You said loyalty is violence, she said. Yes, and love. He hesitated. Is defiance, she finished for him. Defiance doesn't mean becoming him. Miho's eyes darkened. Mercy is read as weakness. Not always, Petra said. Sometimes it's read as control. He looked at her, really looked like he was measuring the weight of her words against decades of blood math. If I don't finish this, he said, he'll come again. Maybe, she replied. But if you erase him... The city fills the space with something worse. Silence stretched. Somewhere above them, traffic rolled on. People went home, ate dinner, slept. Miho closed his eyes. When he opened them, the shaking had stopped. I won't touch his family, he said. I won't burn neighborhoods. And him? Petra asked. Miho considered. I'll take his power, his roots, his protection. Leave him alive to watch the city move on without him. Petra nodded. That's annihilation, without the fire. A knock came at the door. Captain J stepped in, eyes flicking from Petra to Miho. We're ready. Miho looked at Petra one last time. This changes everything, he said. It already did, she replied. Just make sure it changes you too. He leaned down, pressed his forehead to hers, then he turned and walked out. Hours later, dawn crept pale and uncertain over the city. Petra sat wrapped in a coat that smelled like Miho, sipping water she kept forgetting to swallow. Outside the window, New York reset itself like it always did. Trash trucks, joggers, coffee carts opening for business. Her phone buzzed once. A single message. It's done. She didn't ask how. She didn't need details. When Miho returned, he looked older, quieter. Like something essential had been cut away with precision. He sat beside her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Petra reached for his hand. If someone kidnapped the person you love, she said softly, eyes on his. Would you show mercy? She squeezed his fingers. And if you wouldn't, could you live with that? Miho stared out at the waking city. I don't know yet, he said. The answer wasn't comforting, but it was honest. And in their world, that was the only thing that ever lasted. 6 hours. That was all Miho took. Not because he was in a hurry, but because efficiency was a language the city understood. At 3:12 a.m., his people moved. No sirens. No spectacle. No bodies left in the street to make a point. This wasn't vengeance. It was correction. Ramsey Xiao woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels staged. His penthouse windows showed the city exactly as it should be. Lights scattered like constellations, traffic thin but steady. But something was wrong. His phone didn't vibrate. He reached for it. No signal. The landline was dead too. Ramsey sat up slowly, pulse tightening. He crossed to the bar, poured himself a drink with a hand that refused to shake. Discipline mattered, even now. A knock came at the door. 3 knocks. Even, calm. Ramsey didn't answer. The lock clicked anyway. Miho stepped inside alone. No guards, no gun drawn, just a man who had already won. Ramsey stood, anger flaring hot and sharp. "You think this is over?" Miho closed the door behind him. "It was over 6 hours ago." Ramsey laughed. "You didn't touch me. That tells me everything." Miho met his gaze. "I touched everything else." "Don't." Ramsey's smile faltered. Miho spoke without raising his voice. "Your port contracts are frozen. Your warehouse licenses revoked. Your protection agreements dissolved." Ramsey's eyes darted, calculating. "The Italians pulled out at midnight," Miho continued. "The Russians an hour later. Your captains took buyouts and walked." "That's impossible," Ramsey snapped. Miho shrugged. "They chose stability." Ramsey's face flushed. "You think love made you smarter?" Miho stepped closer. "No. It made me precise." Ramsey's bravado cracked. "You won't kill me." Miho shook his head. "No." Hope flickered. "I'm leaving you alive," Miho said. "To remember this." Ramsey swallowed. "You wanted to prove love was weakness," Miho continued. "Now you'll watch how it sharpens." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "If you reach for her again," Miho said quietly, "I won't come alone." The door closed. Ramsey sank into a chair, city still glowing beyond the glass unchanged, unforgiving. By sunrise, the message had traveled. Not through headlines, not through rumors, through absence, accounts locked, phones unanswered, doors that no longer opened. Miho returned to Petra as the city reset itself around them. She watched him closely. "You didn't burn it," she said. "No," he replied. "You changed it." Miho nodded once. Love hadn't softened him. It had taught him where to cut. After the war, nothing looked different. That was the first lie people told themselves. Club Diamond still opened on time. Neon still hummed along 32nd Street. Cars still double-parked. Music still bled into sidewalks thick with steam from subway grates. But the city had adjusted its posture. Petra felt it before she saw it. The car was always waiting now. Not idling. Not obvious. Just there, engine off, driver reading, eyes up. The same 2 faces rotated shifts. No small talk. No names exchanged. They walked half a step behind her, never in front. She hated it. Not because it frightened her, but because it reminded her she had become valuable. When she entered a room, conversations shifted. People clocked her presence the way they once clocked Miho's. Not fear, awareness. At Club Diamond, the staff treated her differently too. Respect edged with caution. Loyalty no longer casual, but conscious. She noticed who stopped touching her arm when they spoke, who waited for her nod before acting. She missed the old ease. Miho noticed everything. He always had, but now he filtered it. Enemies didn't get second chances anymore. Not warnings, not patience. Meetings were shorter, smiles rarer. His voice, when it carried weight, carried it without effort. But in private, something else lived. In the quiet moments, early mornings, lights low, city still half asleep, he reached for Petra without thinking. Hand finding hers, shoulder brushing against her back as he passed. He listened more. When she spoke, he didn't just hear, he absorbed. They didn't talk about the warehouse, or the van, or the 6 hours. They didn't need to. Other families noticed too. Invitations came more carefully worded. Deals structured with clearer boundaries. Old men who once tested him now deferred without comment. No one mentioned Ramsey Xiao. That silence said enough. Petra walked the neighborhood sometimes, flanked by distance and eyes she couldn't turn off. She still bought cheap coffee, still counted her steps, still kept her pride intact. But she also carried the weight of consequence. She had changed a system without meaning to. And systems, once altered, never truly forgave the hand that did it. Miho knew that. So did the city. After the war, nothing looked different. Everything was. The city never slept, but it did pause. Not for long. Just enough to breathe. From the penthouse windows, New York stretched outward in layers of light and shadow. Traffic stitched red and white lines through avenues. Rooftops held secrets. Alleys remembered things the morning would pretend never happened. Petra stood barefoot on the cool marble floor, a glass of water in her hand she'd already forgotten to drink. She watched the city the way you watch something that once tried to break you and failed. Behind her, Miho leaned against the window frame, jacket off, sleeves rolled. He looked calmer now, not soft, never soft, but settled in a way she hadn't seen before her. For years, he'd lived like a closed fist. Power clenched tight, control absolute, no space for error, no space for warmth, no space for love. The rule had been simple. No women, no weakness. Rules were how men like Miho survived. They turned chaos into structure, emotion into liability, people into pieces on a board. The rule had kept him alive. It had also hollowed him out. Petra didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Silence had become a language between them, one that didn't demand explanations or promises. Miho broke the quiet first. "I was wrong," he said. The words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. They landed the way truth does, clean and final. Petra turned to him. "About what?" "The rule," he said. "About all of it." He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. Even now, after everything, he still gave her space. Choice mattered to him in a way it hadn't before. "I thought love made men careless," he continued. "I thought attachment was a crack enemies could crawl through. I thought my father died because he cared." Petra waited. She had learned not to rush him through the hard parts. "I was wrong," he repeated. "He died because he underestimated hate. I survived because I became empty. But surviving isn't living." Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Somewhere below, laughter spilled out of a bar doorway and disappeared into traffic. Petra crossed the space between them and rested her head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady. Controlled? Alive. "You didn't break the rule," she said quietly. "You outgrew it." Miho let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Love hadn't softened him. It had clarified him. Before Petra, everything had been about maintaining dominance. After her, it was about direction, purpose, protection, with intention, not impulse. Enemies didn't fear him because he was ruthless. They feared him because he knew exactly what and who he was willing to burn the world for. That kind of certainty couldn't be negotiated with. Petra had changed too. She still remembered the girl with $43 and no exit. The one who counted flyers like lifelines. The one who believed pride was the only thing no one could take from her. She hadn't lost that girl. She had expanded her. Now she moved through rooms with confidence that wasn't borrowed. She made decisions that rippled outward. She spoke, and people listened. Not because of Miho's name, but because her voice carried weight earned the hard way. She loved a dangerous man, but she had never belonged to him as a possession. She belonged with him as a choice. That was the difference. The city watched them from below, unaware of the quiet rebellion taking place above it. No banners, no declarations, just two people refusing the roles the world had written for them. A crime lord who chose love over isolation. A woman who chose danger without surrendering herself. Love, in their world, wasn't soft. It was defiant. It said, "I see how this ends and I'm choosing it anyway." Miho wrapped an arm around Petra's shoulders, pulling her closer. She fit there naturally, like she'd always belonged in that space. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." Petra smiled, small but sure. That's the only rule that matters. Below them, the city kept moving. Deals would be made. Lines would be crossed. New enemies would rise where old ones fell. But tonight, just for this moment, the war was over. And the rule was wrong.